The sound of clanging metal echoed through the wide steel corridors of Haven Dynamics, a defense manufacturing plant tucked into the gray heart of Toledo, Ohio. Sparks burst from welding torches, machines hummed with relentless rhythm, and the air smelled of oil, iron, and effort. Inside that chaos, Sarah Jennings moved with the quiet precision of someone who had lived 100 lives already. At 34, Sarah had been a Marine, a marksmanship instructor, and a woman who had once commanded respect from men who faced death daily. Now she was just Jennings, the maintenance supervisor who kept the old machines alive long enough to meet quarterly quotas. The factory was big, loud, and unforgiving. No one cared that she had medals tucked away in a drawer, or that she once trained recruits who now guarded embassies. Here, what mattered was keeping the production line running and knowing how to survive the locker room talk. The men didn't hate her exactly. They just didn't understand her. "Hey, kindergarten cop," one of them called out as she passed, his laughter echoing off the metal walls. "You gonna give us another safety lecture today?" She didn't stop walking. She didn't even turn her head. "Only if you plan to burn the place down again, Dalton," she said evenly, not breaking stride. The others chuckled, and Dalton looked half embarrassed, half impressed that she'd remembered his mistake from last month, the one that nearly caused a small explosion. Sarah's tone wasn't cruel, but it cut sharper than their jokes. She reached the maintenance office, a small glass booth overlooking the assembly line. From here, she could see everything, hundreds of workers, conveyor belts loaded with components for defense-grade targeting systems, and the massive steel doors where trucks rolled in and out. The place was a machine that never slept. Sarah leaned against the glass, watching the organized chaos. She admired it in a way. Order within noise. Movement with purpose. It reminded her of the Corps, or at least it used to. Now it was something else. The company had grown careless since winning a new federal contract. Corners were being cut, cheaper materials, understaffed security shifts, half-broken alarms ignored, because maintenance will fix it later. She'd reported it, of course, 3 times. Each time, Ray Collins, the plant manager, brushed her off with a tight smile and a lazy promise. "Relax, Jennings," he'd said last week, waving a coffee cup like a peace offering. "This isn't a war zone. It's a factory. People slip up. It happens." Sarah's eyes had drifted toward the factory floor. Until it doesn't, and when it doesn't, people die. Ray just laughed, patted her shoulder, and walked away. Now, as she checked through maintenance logs, she saw the same problems repeat: electrical surges, unlocked supply gates, late security patrols. She rubbed her temples. A place like this should have been tight, disciplined. Instead, it was a ticking clock with a broken spring. At 5:30 p.m., the whistle blew, signaling the end of the day's shift. Workers filed out, exchanging crude jokes and weekend plans. The last one to leave the floor was Brock Daniels, a new hire, a bulky man with an ego as large as his shoulders. He paused by her desk, smirking. "Hey, Sarge, you staying late again? What is this, boot camp overtime?" Sarah didn't look up from her clipboard. "Routine inspection." "Go home, Daniels." He chuckled, pretending to salute. "Whatever you say, ma'am. Just don't make us do push-ups tomorrow." The door slammed shut behind him, and the factory fell silent. Sarah exhaled, tension easing from her shoulders. She preferred the quiet. It was the only time the place made sense. Machines over men, rhythm over ego. She put on her gloves, grabbed a flashlight, and began her evening rounds. The echo of her boots followed her down the main assembly corridor. She checked pressure gauges, scanned electrical boxes, and listened for irregular hums in the production motors. Her attention to detail bordered on obsessive. Every click, Every flicker meant something to her. She wasn't just fixing machines. She was holding back chaos. Halfway through her inspection, the lights flickered. Once, then again. Power fluctuations. She frowned. Not again. She muttered, heading toward the substation room. Inside, she traced the wires to the backup power grid, the same one she'd warned Collins about 2 weeks ago. Someone had been in here. The panel screws were half loose, and a small, greasy handprint marked the wall. She crouched down, inspecting the base. Then she noticed it, a scuff mark near the doorframe. Recent, a steel-toed boot tread. Too large for her maintenance crew, too deliberate to be an accident. She straightened slowly, flashlight beams slicing across the dark corners of the room. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. Old instincts whispered, "Something's off." She shut the panel, double-checked the lock, and jotted a quick note in her logbook. But her mind wasn't on maintenance anymore. By the time she reached the staff exit, the factory had settled into stillness. The sound of cooling metal filled the air. Outside, the sky burned orange with sunset. Sarah paused, glancing toward the security booth. Empty. She frowned. Where the hell's Lopez? The guard was supposed to be there until 7. She looked around. No sign of him, no truck in the lot. Just the hum of streetlights flickering to life. A cold wind swept through the open yard, carrying a faint metallic smell. Sarah took one last look at the factory, a massive beast of iron and secrets, and something in her gut told her this quiet wasn't peace. It was waiting. Later at home, she poured herself a cup of black coffee and sat by the window of her small apartment. On the wall behind her hung a photograph. Her unit in Afghanistan, all in dusty fatigues, smiling after a long patrol. 2 faces in the photo were circled in pen, Corporal Reese and Private Lang, both killed in a mission gone wrong. She stared at their faces for a long time. She could still hear the gunfire, the screams, the radio static, the feeling of sand in her teeth, the smell of cordite. She'd told herself she was done with all of it. Done with leading, with fighting, with carrying the weight of lives. The factory had been her quiet exile, a place where the worst thing that could happen was a broken press or a missing wrench. Until tonight. Something was changing. The signs were there, loose security, strange power failures, missing guards. Sarah picked up her phone, hesitated, then set it down. No one would listen. Not Collins. Not anyone. She took another sip of coffee, staring into the dark street below. In the distance, the factory lights blinked once, twice, and went dark. Her hand froze mid-air. Power grid again? She whispered, setting down her cup. But deep down, she knew it wasn't that simple. The next morning would bring mockery, laughter, and another safety meeting that no one would take seriously. They'd call her too uptight, too military, too much. And she'd take it, as she always did. Calm, polite, unshaken. But that night, as she lay in bed, the hum of the city outside fading to silence, she felt something stir inside her, the same quiet alertness she used to feel before an ambush. Sarah Jennings didn't know it yet, but the factory she'd chosen as her escape would soon become her battlefield. And when the alarms finally blared, the men who mocked her would learn. It wasn't kindergarten. It was war. Morning sunlight broke over the skyline of Toledo, pale and cold, spilling across the gray walls of Haven Dynamics. The factory awoke slowly. Forklifts whining, engines groaning, men shouting greetings drowned beneath the metallic hum. To anyone walking in, it looked like just another workday. But to Sarah Jennings, everything felt slightly off. The power outage from the night before still nagged at her. She'd filed a report first thing that morning, detailed, thorough, the way Marines did things. And as usual, The paper trail vanished straight into Ray Collins' trash bin. She walked into the main hall, clipboard in hand, her boots echoing against the concrete floor. Conversations died as she passed. The men weren't hostile, not exactly, but there was always that undercurrent of something between challenge and mockery. She was used to it. After all, she was the only woman in a department filled with men who still thought discipline was just another word for control. The weekly safety meeting began at 9 a.m. sharp. Everyone gathered in the break room. 50 workers, paper cups of burnt coffee, the smell of motor oil still clinging to their clothes. Collins stood at the front with his usual easy grin, pretending to be a man in charge. "All right, folks," he said cheerfully. "Before we get into the updates, Jennings here's got some notes for you all. Safety protocols, same as every week." A collective groan went through the room. Sarah stepped forward, calm and unbothered, flipping her clipboard open. "Yesterday's electrical surge wasn't random," she began. "Someone accessed a restricted panel without logging it. If that continues, we could lose more than power. We could lose lives." Brock Daniels, the new guy, snorted from the back. "Relax, lady. This isn't boot camp. We're making parts, not fighting wars." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Sarah looked up, meeting his eyes. Her gaze was sharp, disciplined, not angry, just steady in a way that made the laughter fade. "You think a short circuit cares what you're building, Daniels?" she asked softly. "It burns the same no matter who's holding the wrench." The room fell silent for a beat. But then Collins jumped in, trying to lighten the mood. "Come on, Sarah. Don't scare the new hires. It's a factory, not a firing range." That got a few more laughs. Sarah closed her clipboard. "No, it's not a firing range," she said. "But maybe it should be. At least then people would respect their environment." She turned, walking out before anyone could respond. The laughter rose again behind her, softer this time, more uncertain. She spent the rest of the morning checking the West Wing compressors. It was tedious work, but she preferred it. Machines didn't gossip. They didn't judge. They only responded to precision. Around noon, she took her lunch break outside. Black coffee, an apple, and silence. She sat on the loading dock, watching trucks roll in and out, her mind wandering. She thought of Afghanistan, the dust storms that came out of nowhere, the nights she'd sat awake, listening to distant mortar fire, waiting for the next hit. She'd learned then that calm wasn't just a choice, it was armor. And now, that same armor was what kept her together here. A shadow fell across her. She looked up to see Brock standing there, wiping grease off his hands. "You always this serious?" he asked. "Only when people are stupid," she said without looking up. He smirked. "Guess that means always, huh?" She didn't reply. He kicked at the concrete, trying to fill the silence. "You really were a Marine?" Sarah nodded. "What's it like?" "Loud," she said. "And lonely." He laughed awkwardly. "You talk like you're still there." She glanced up at him finally. "Some places don't let go that easy." He looked like he wanted to say something else, but Colin's voice boomed from the door. "Hey, Daniels. Lunch is over. Move it." Brock gave her a quick nod and jogged off. Sarah watched him go, then looked back toward the factory floor, her instincts whispering again. Something about him lingered in her mind. Not suspicion, exactly. Just awareness. By evening, a storm rolled in. Rain lashed against the metal roof, lightning flashing like camera bursts. Most of the crew had gone home early. Weather excuse, though no one really cared. Sarah stayed behind, as usual. The main assembly line was empty, save for the dull whir of cooling fans. She checked the control panels again, all functioning normally. The power fluctuations hadn't returned. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling from last night. Her radio crackled to life. "Jennings, you still there?" It was Lopez, the security guard. "Yeah," she replied, adjusting the channel. "You're early tonight." "Yeah, the boss wanted double coverage. Said we've had some complaints about trespassers on the outer fence." Sarah frowned. "Trespassers? When?" "Yesterday night, apparently. Cameras didn't pick anything up, but there's footprints near the north gate. Could be kids, could be something else." Her pulse ticked faster. "You reported to Collins?" "Yeah. He said it's probably nothing. Still, I'm checking it out." "You locking up soon?" She looked around the dimly lit factory floor. "In a bit. Be careful out there." "Always am," Lopez said. Then the radio cut off with a crackle. Sarah set it down, staring through the rain-smeared windows. Thunder rolled again, long and low. She moved toward the north corridor, the one closest to the outer fence. Her flashlight beam swept across the empty aisles. Everything looked normal. Too normal. Then she heard it. A faint thunk. Metal against metal. Somewhere near the rear storage wing. She froze, listening. Another thunk. Louder this time. She turned off her light. For a long moment, the only sound was the rain drumming on the roof. Then, from the shadows ahead, came the muffled creak of a door, slowly opening. Sarah moved silently, hugging the wall. Her boots made no sound on the concrete. Her training had been buried for years, but it came back like a reflex. Every step measured, every breath controlled. She reached the corner and peeked around. Nothing. Just an open doorway and the smell of oil. She stepped closer. The door led to Storage Bay 6, restricted area, normally locked at all times. The lock now hung twisted, pried open. Sarah's pulse climbed. She crouched, inspecting the floor. Muddy boot prints, fresh. She straightened, moving deeper inside. Rows of crates lined the walls, each marked with serial numbers and military seals. One of the crates near the back had been opened, its lid cracked, packaging torn. She lifted the edge of the tarp. Beneath it, she saw rows of circuit components, sensors, and encrypted chips. Nothing an ordinary thief would even recognize. Whoever broke in knew exactly what to take. Her radio buzzed again. "Jennings, you there?" Lopez's voice was sharp now. "We've got movement by the south loading gate. 4, maybe 5 people. Not employees." Sarah's blood went cold. "Get inside and lock the doors," she said quickly. "Already trying." Then static. "Lopez?" No response. Sarah gritted her teeth, heart pounding. She sprinted toward the security room, sliding across the slick floor. Her hand reached for the emergency lock switch, but the system. Lights were already red, disabled. Someone had cut power again. And this time, it wasn't a glitch. She looked toward the main hall. In the distance, through the rain-streaked windows, faint silhouettes moved near the loading dock. Too many for night shift. Too coordinated to be lost. Sarah's stomach twisted. She grabbed the small flashlight from her belt, the beam barely cutting through the dark. Her breathing steadied, controlled, practiced. She'd been here before, just not in this uniform. Outside, lightning flashed, illuminating the figures, masks, rifles, and the cold confidence of men who'd done this before. "This isn't happening," she whispered, though she already knew it was. The power grid flickered again, machines shuddering to a stop. The hum of the factory died into silence. The invaders began moving toward the main entrance. Sarah stood still in the darkness, every nerve alive, every instinct awake. The others might still think this was just a job, but she knew better. This wasn't a drill. It wasn't a malfunction. It was the beginning of something far worse. And the next time she heard that smug voice say, "This isn't kindergarten," they'd be right, because class was about to begin. The power died completely. Machines stopped mid-cycle, leaving the vast expanse of Haven dynamics cloaked in heavy, unnatural silence. The only sound left was the slow drip of rain leaking through an exhaust vent, and the soft echo of Sarah's own heartbeat in her ears. She stood perfectly still in the dark corridor, one hand resting against the cold steel wall. Her breathing slowed. Years of training took over without thought, every sense sharpened, every motion deliberate. Through the window above the main assembly floor, she saw movement, faint shadows against the strobing flashes of lightning outside. The intruders were inside now. There were 6 of them, maybe 7. Dressed in factory-style coveralls, masks covering their faces, weapons slung tight across their chests. They moved with practiced rhythm, not random thieves. Professionals. Sarah crouched low, slipping behind a row of disassembled equipment crates. Her mind moved faster than her fear. Entry point south loading gate. Target, classified materials in Bay 6. Time window, less than 10 minutes before someone outside notices the blackout. She scanned the corners, watching their leader, a tall man with a black scarf tied around his neck, gesture sharply toward the maintenance bay. The others spread out, securing doors, cutting off exits. The factory's massive space worked against her. Wide floors, few hiding spots. Every echo stretched for miles. Sarah's gaze darted toward the far end of the line, 3 workers still trapped on the floor. They hadn't gone home early like most. She recognized them immediately. Brock Daniels, Tommy Ruiz, and Renee Laird. They were huddled behind a metal press, unaware of how exposed they really were. "Damn it," Sarah whispered. She scanned the wall behind her. Emergency lights, control panel, fire alarm system. If she could reach it, she might be able to alert the outside. But that meant crossing 20 feet of open ground with at least 2 gunmen patrolling the upper catwalk. Her fingers brushed against the wrench hanging from her belt. Not much, but better than nothing. Then came the sound she dreaded, shouting. "Everyone down. Nobody moves." One of the intruders fired a shot into the ceiling. The sound ripped through the factory, deafening and final. The 3 workers screamed, hitting the ground. Brock tried to crawl backward, but another masked man kicked him hard in the ribs. Sarah's muscles tensed, every instinct screaming to move, to fight. But she held still. Not yet, not without a plan. The gunmen began herding the workers together. Their leader barked orders. "Lock those doors. Get the codes. We don't have long." The group split, one covering the north stairwell, 2 heading for the storage bays. Sarah's mind connected the pieces fast. They weren't just robbing the place. They were targeting something specific, maybe the prototype targeting chips from the defense contract. Military-grade tech. She'd seen those crates in Bay 6, under double lock. Whoever these men were, they weren't factory thieves. They were professionals on a mission. She took a quiet step backward, trying to reach the maintenance hallway. Every nerve screamed caution. Her boot hit something metallic, a fallen wrench. It clattered once, echoing like thunder. Sarah froze. The nearest intruder turned his head sharply. What was that? Flashlight beams cut across the dark, swinging in her direction. She ducked, slipping behind a tool rack, breath held. The man moved closer. His boots scraped against the concrete. "Probably rats," another voice muttered. "No," the first said. That sounded like... He turned the corner and saw nothing. The space was empty. Sarah had already moved, sliding silently along the maintenance catwalk above them, using her knowledge of the plant's layout like a weapon. She reached the second-floor storage corridor and ducked inside an old equipment closet. Her pulse hammered, but her expression stayed calm. She checked her watch, 8:57 p.m. Security backup should have been here by now, unless they'd been neutralized already. She grabbed the old radio from the wall, flicking through channels. Static, every frequency jammed. That told her everything she needed to know. They'd come prepared. Below her, voices echoed faintly through the floor grates. "Move them to the center," one man ordered. "We'll handle the codes here." Brock's voice rose shakily. "Look, we don't know anything. We just worked the line." A brutal crack followed. Someone hit him. Sarah's jaw tightened. She looked around the small closet, scanning for anything useful. Tools, spare wiring, old security vests. Then her eyes landed on a locked cabinet marked Emergency Armory, Federal Contractor Access Only. Her pulse spiked. Most people in the plant didn't even know that locker existed. It was part of a long-forgotten Homeland Security program from years ago, when the factory had been under higher alert. She pulled out her keyring. Her hand trembled slightly as she found the master maintenance key. It fit. The latch clicked open. Inside, wrapped in dust-covered canvas, was a Beretta M9 pistol, 2 magazines, and a small box of ammo. Sarah's breath caught. The last time she'd held that model, she was in uniform, standing in the blazing Afghan sun. She remembered the weight and what it had cost her. She closed her eyes, the memory flashing, the ambush, the shouting, the 2 soldiers she'd lost. The faces she couldn't forget. Her hands shook as she picked up the gun. For a moment, she almost put it back. She wasn't supposed to be this person anymore. But then downstairs, a scream tore through the silence. Renee. Sarah's body reacted before her brain did. She loaded the pistol, racked the slide, and stood up. Down below, the intruders had gathered everyone near the central press. Brock knelt beside Renee, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. The leader paced slowly, his weapon slung across his shoulder. "Where's the access card?" he demanded. "Someone here has it. You've got 10 seconds before I start making examples." No one answered. 10. Sarah moved along the upper catwalk, every step measured, pistol steady. 9. Lightning flashed through the high windows, revealing her silhouette for a brief instant, a ghost among steel and shadow. 8. She crouched near a railing, aligning her sights. 7. The leader lifted his gun toward Brock. 6. Sarah exhaled. "No," she whispered. The first shot cracked through the air. The bullet struck clean through the man's shoulder, spinning him backward. The room erupted in chaos, shouts, gunfire, panic. Sarah ducked, rolled behind a beam, fired again. Another gunman dropped. "Move!" She shouted from above, her voice sharp, commanding, the same tone she'd once used to rally frightened soldiers under fire. The workers scrambled for cover, diving behind machines. Brock stared upward in disbelief. "Jennings? Stay down." She barked, firing again. The attackers returned fire, bullets pinging off the metal around her. Sparks rained down, the air thick with noise and fear. Sarah moved like she was back on deployment, fast, precise, untouchable. She dropped to the lower floor, landing hard, rolling behind a compressor. Another attacker charged, rifle raised. She spun, shot once, clean through the chest. Her hands didn't shake. Her breathing didn't falter. For the first time in years, she wasn't suppressing her instincts. She was surviving. The remaining intruders pulled back toward the loading bay, dragging their wounded leader. "Fall back," one shouted. "Now." Sarah advanced carefully, every sense alert. The sound of rain mixed with the hiss of ruptured air hoses. She heard tires screech outside, a van starting up. They were retreating. For now. She lowered her weapon slightly, scanning the area. 3 men down. 4 escaped. Brock emerged from cover, wide-eyed. Holy Sarah. What the hell? She looked at him, expression unreadable. Get Renee and Tommy out. Call 911. Tell them multiple armed suspects just left the premises. He blinked at her, still shaking. Where did you learn to? Just go, she said. He hesitated, then obeyed, pulling the others toward the emergency exit. Sarah stood alone in the flickering half-light, pistol still warm in her hands, the faint echo of gunfire still ringing in her ears. She looked down at the man she'd shot first, the leader, groaning, clutching his bleeding shoulder. He glared up at her, eyes filled with hate. You don't know who you're dealing with. Sarah's jaw tightened. No, she said softly, chambering another round. But you picked the wrong factory. Outside, sirens wailed faintly in the distance, growing louder by the second. Sarah holstered the weapon, walking past fallen shell casings and shattered glass. The ghosts of her past weren't gone. They never would be. But tonight, for the first time, they finally had purpose again. The factory lights flickered once more, humming back to life. Haven Dynamics was no longer silent. It was awake. And so was she. The factory floor was chaos frozen in time. Broken glass glittered like frost. Shell casings scattered across the oil-stained ground. And the smell of gunpowder lingered in the air like a ghost refusing to leave. Sarah Jennings crouched beside the wounded intruder. His black scarf had fallen off, revealing a clean-cut face, not some street criminal, but someone trained, military, even. She pressed her knee into his shoulder wound, earning a sharp grunt of pain. Who sent you? She demanded. The man smirked through the blood on his lips. You'll find out soon enough. Sarah leaned closer, voice low and dangerous. You came after classified defense tech. You don't get to be mysterious. He only laughed, a hollow, cruel sound. You think you stopped us? That was just phase 1. Before she could respond, headlights blazed through the broken windows near the loading bay. Several vehicles, fast and coordinated. Sarah's blood ran cold. The second wave had arrived. She dropped the man and ran for the main panel. Alarms blared again, red lights strobing across the vast machinery like warning beacons. Outside, engines revved, then doors slammed. Boots hit the pavement in unison. These weren't the same men as before. They moved with discipline. Another strike team, better equipped. She grabbed the factory's emergency radio again, nothing but static. The jamming signal was still active. Whoever they were, they'd planned this for months. Sarah scanned the rows of industrial equipment, searching for any workers still left behind. Brock and the others had escaped through the north exit. Good. Now it was just her, and whoever was coming through those doors. She ducked into the upper control platform, overlooking the main floor. Her old instincts took over. Assess, adapt, survive. Through the cracked window, she saw them. Black tactical gear, visors reflecting flashes of lightning. One carried a heavy breaching tool. Another had a drone hovering over his shoulder, scanning thermal signatures. They're sweeping for me. Sarah checked the Beretta. One magazine half spent, one full. Not enough for a full-scale assault. She needed strategy, not firepower. Her eyes flicked toward the heavy cranes overhead, capable of lifting several tons. And then the massive vats of pressurized coolant stacked by the assembly line. One good hit, and she smiled grimly. Welcome to my factory. The first explosion of movement came from the west door. The intruders stormed in, flashlights cutting through the dark. Sarah waited until they were beneath the crane's chain. Then she fired a single round at the release latch. The steel hook dropped like thunder. The chain smashed into the ground, scattering the attackers in all directions. Gunfire erupted instantly, bullets chewing through the walls. Sarah ducked and moved. She fired twice, hitting the control switch for the coolant system. A hiss filled the room as cold vapor spilled from ruptured lines, turning the air into a freezing white fog. Visuals down. Switch to thermal. One voice barked. Sarah darted through the haze, using the chaos like camouflage. Every corner of this plant was her terrain. She knew where the floors creaked, where the cover was thickest, where the lights would flicker first. A silhouette loomed through the fog. She raised the Beretta, fired once, twice. The figure collapsed. Another came up behind her, swinging the butt of a rifle. She spun, locked with her forearm, and slammed her elbow into his throat. He crumpled silently. Adrenaline burned through her veins, but her mind stayed sharp. Each move had purpose. Each breath counted. She wasn't supposed to be here. She was supposed to be retired, a quiet maintenance supervisor, not a soldier. But tonight had rewritten the rules. Up on the control platform, a red light blinked, motion alert in Bay 6. Sarah froze. That was the defense prototype storage, the real target. They're splitting forces. She sprinted for the stairs, ducking behind machinery as bullets shattered glass above her. Her boots pounded against the steel grating, echoing through the cavernous space. By the time she reached Bay 6, 2 intruders were already there, cutting through the reinforced lock with a plasma torch. Sparks lit the walls like fireworks. Sarah crouched behind a forklift, heart hammering. One of them spoke into his comms. Package secured in 2 minutes. Alpha team, hold your position. Not happening, she thought. She glanced at the forklift, diesel model, keys still in. Perfect. With a deep breath, she started it. The engine roared to life. Both intruders spun in surprise. Sarah jammed the accelerator. The forklift lunged forward, slamming into them and knocking the torch across the floor. One man flew into a stack of crates. The other went down hard, weapons skidding away. She jumped out, grabbed the rifle, and turned it on the one still moving. "Stay down," she growled. He spat blood but sneered. "You're too late." They've already... A distant explosion shook the walls, cutting him off. The lights flickered, and a low hum filled the air. They've triggered something. Sarah ran toward the central control panel. The monitors flickered with data streams, encrypted access codes being transferred remotely. They were hacking the factory's servers through the mainframe. She pulled a cable from the nearest console and jammed it into the override port. The system demanded a command key. She typed the old security bypass from memory. Override accepted. Network disconnecting. The hacking stopped instantly. But so did the hum. In its place came a chilling voice from the intruder's fallen COM device. "You're impressive, Jennings. You should have stayed out of it." Sarah froze. That voice, cold, familiar. She bent down, picked up the COM. "Who is this?" A pause. Then, "Your old CO sends his regards." The blood drained from her face. Colonel Reeves. Her former commanding officer. The same man who'd led the operation that ended her career. The one who left her squad to die and covered it up. It couldn't be coincidence. She clenched her jaw. "You're behind this?" "Not directly," the voice replied calmly. "But let's just say the people I work for have bigger plans than a broken soldier in a factory." The line cut off. Sarah stared at the dead COM for a long moment, her pulse roaring in her ears. This wasn't just an attack. It was personal. Outside, the sirens had grown louder. Police units were finally closing in, But so were reinforcements for Reeves's mercenaries. Sarah moved fast, grabbing the rifle, spare ammo, and a radio headset from one of the fallen men. She climbed back to the upper balcony, scanning the outer gates. Through the rain, she saw vehicles positioning themselves, SUVs with blacked-out windows. Tactical lights flicked across the fences. She could call the cops, surrender the factory, let it go. But she knew what was inside Bay 6. Those targeting systems weren't just valuable. They were deadly in the wrong hands. And if Reeves wanted them, it meant something far worse than money. She checked her weapon, took a slow breath, and whispered to herself, "All right, Colonel. You want round 2? Let's make it count." At that moment, a flash flood of movement came from the east entrance. Another squad breaching. Sarah hit the catwalk lights, plunging that side of the factory into darkness. Then she sprinted to the far end, where she could flank them from above. Gunfire erupted again. The metallic rhythm of battle filled the air, echoing between the high steel walls. Sarah moved like a phantom through the rafters, firing short, precise bursts. Every shot deliberate. Below her, the intruders tried to coordinate, but they didn't know her, didn't know how she thought. She dropped smoke grenades from the maintenance shelf, clouding their vision. "Move to cover," one shouted. Too late. She was already on the ground behind them. 3 shots. 3 targets down. One turned and swung his rifle. She parried it with the stock of her own, twisted, and slammed him into a control panel. Electric sparks lit the air as he dropped, unconscious. The rest fled through the broken gate, vanishing into the storm. Sarah stood still, breathing hard, every muscle trembling. The rain outside intensified, hammering the roof. She holstered her gun, eyes fixed on the flickering light of the control station. The first battle had been survival. This one was war. And she knew exactly who she was fighting now. Rain turned the factory courtyard into a river of light and reflection. Blue and red strobes from police cars painted the steel walls like a twisted carnival. The storm had finally broken, but inside Sarah Jennings, the thunder hadn't stopped. She stood by the open bay doors, soaked to the bone, rifle still in hand. The officers shouted for her to drop it, and for a second, she didn't move, not because she wanted to resist, but because her mind was still halfway in the fight. "Ma'am, drop the weapon." Sarah blinked back to the present. Slowly, she placed the rifle on the wet concrete and raised her hands. A young officer approached, eyes wide at the carnage behind her. Shell casings, broken machines, bodies wrapped in tarps. "Jesus, what happened here?" Sarah's voice was hoarse. Hostile infiltration. Multiple assailants. They were after classified hardware. He frowned. "Your? Factory security?" "Maintenance supervisor," she said flatly. That earned her a skeptical look. A second later, a man in a dark trench coat pushed through the line of uniforms. Mid-50s, salt and pepper hair, calm eyes that had seen too much. He flashed a badge. "FBI Special Agent Douglas Vance. Ms. Jennings," he said evenly. "You want to tell me how one maintenance supervisor managed to hold off an armed strike team?" Sarah glanced at the bodies again. "They made mistakes." "I didn't." Vance studied her for a long moment. "You're ex-military." She didn't answer, but he didn't need her to. Army Airborne, Afghanistan. Commendations for marksmanship and tactical command. You disappeared off the grid 5 years ago. Sarah's stomach tightened. You did your homework fast. He nodded toward the factory floor. When 8 people end up dead and federal property is involved, people start digging real quick. Inside the conference room, officers gathered evidence while paramedics carried the wounded intruder past. The man Sarah had first shot, the leader from Phase 1, was still alive. heavily sedated, bleeding through his bandages. Vance and Sarah stood near the window, watching. "Do you know who they were?" he asked. "Not officially," she said. "But they had military discipline. Too clean. Too efficient." "Mercenaries," Vance said. "Former contractors, most likely. We've been tracking a cell called Raven Unit. Freelancers tied to a dozen industrial thefts across the Midwest. No one knows who funds them." Sarah folded her arms. "I do." He turned to her. "Colonel Nathan Reeves," she said quietly. "My old CO. He's behind this." Vance didn't flinch, but his jaw tightened slightly. "Reeves? That name's come up before. But you realize how it sounds, right? No evidence. No paper trail. Just your word." "He was supposed to be court-martialed," Sarah said, "for abandoning his unit under fire. He got cleared, promoted, and disappeared into private defense work. Now he's running black ops through proxies like Raven Unit." Vance sighed, rubbing his temple. "Jennings, I've seen a lot of people break under stress. You just fought a war in your own workplace. Maybe you're connecting dots that aren't." She cut him off. "He spoke to me. That got his attention." "What?" "Through there comes." He called me by name. For a moment, Vance said nothing. Then he motioned to one of his tech agents. "Pull every recording from the factory's network. I want voice logs, signal traces, everything." The tech nodded and hurried off. Sarah exhaled slowly, her body still trembling from the adrenaline crash. "You should get checked out," Vance said, his tone softening slightly. "You've lost blood. You're exhausted. I'll rest when Reeves is in handcuffs." He gave her a long, unreadable look. "You really believe he's coming after you?" She met his gaze. "He already has." By dawn, the rain had stopped. The factory looked less like a battlefield and more like a crime scene. Yellow tape fluttered in the morning wind. Reporters gathered at the perimeter, shouting questions about the factory firefight. Sarah sat on the back of an ambulance, a thermal blanket around her shoulders. Her clothes were torn, streaked with grease and blood. Every muscle screamed for rest, but her mind wouldn't let her stop replaying the night. She'd seen something in the intruders' gear before, a black insignia stamped under their vests. R23, Reeves's old unit number. Vance approached again, coffee in hand. "Our people found that symbol too," he said. "You were right. It's tied to a private firm in D.C., Horizon Tactical Solutions." Sarah's pulse jumped. "Reeves is on their board." Vance nodded grimly. "You know him well." "Too well," she muttered. "He doesn't do small jobs. If he sent men here, it's because this tech is critical." He handed her a tablet showing a classified inventory report. "These targeting chips, experimental AI-guided ballistics processors. Still under federal encryption." Sarah frowned. "Then how did they know where to find them?" "Inside help," Vance said. "Someone leaked the layout and security schedule." Sarah's thoughts raced. Someone from inside Haven Dynamics. Or someone who used to work here, Vance said. They walked through the quiet corridors of the factory together. The silence now felt heavier than before. Vance's phone buzzed. He glanced at the message, his expression darkening. "What is it?" Sarah asked. "Our wounded suspect?" He said. "He's gone." "Gone?" "Vanished." Ambulance was hijacked on the way to the hospital. 2 paramedics dead. Sarah's stomach sank. "Reeves is cleaning up." Vance pocketed his phone, which means he knows we're onto him. They reached Base 6, the place where the first firefight ended. The crate containing the targeting chips had been opened, inspected, and resealed by FBI techs. Sarah stared at the faint scorch marks on the floor, the dried blood where one of the mercenaries had fallen. He won't stop, Agent Vance. This was just testing the water. Vance folded his arms. Then we hit back first. Later that afternoon, they relocated Sarah to a secure federal safe house in the industrial district. The room was small. A bed, a desk, a single window facing a brick wall. Vance placed a file on the desk. Everything we have on Horizon Tactical and Reeves. Some of it's redacted, but maybe you'll see something we don't. Sarah flipped it open. Her eyes scanned the pages, names, locations, financial records. All legal on paper, but she recognized the patterns. Dummy companies, shadow contracts, untraceable transfers. She stopped at one photo, Reeves shaking hands with a senator during a defense conference. The same smug grin she remembered from years ago. He's still untouchable, she said quietly. For now, Vance replied. But we're building a case. I need you to testify. Everything you know from Afghanistan, every order he gave that went sideways. It could connect him to these attacks. Sarah hesitated. If I testify, he'll come for me. He'll come for anyone helping me. Vance's tone hardened. He already has. He stood, buttoning his coat. Get some rest, Jennings. You've earned it. Tomorrow we move you to Quantico for debrief. But when he left the room, Sarah didn't lie down. She stared at the photo again, Reeves's face, and felt something inside her shift. For years she'd buried the guilt of that ambush overseas. The screams, the smoke, the betrayal. But now the ghosts had a name. And this time, she wasn't going to run from them. Outside, across the street from the safe house, a black sedan sat parked under a flickering streetlight. Inside, two men watched her window through binoculars. One of them spoke into a mic. Target confirmed? Orders? A distorted voice crackled through the earpiece. Wait until she's alone. The man smiled faintly. Roger that. As the sedan's headlights dimmed, Sarah sat by the window, unaware that the war she thought she'd survived was only beginning again. She glanced at the gun on the desk, freshly cleaned, loaded. Not this time, she whispered. And somewhere out there, Colonel Nathan Reeves smiled when the first trace ping hit his encrypted phone. Sarah Jennings was back on the radar. The night pressed in heavy and cold around the safe house. Rain whispered against the window like static. Sarah sat at the desk, gun within reach, eyes scanning the files Vance had left. Every line of text felt like a breadcrumb, leading her deeper into the dark. She found a memo stamped classified, internal audit, Horizon Tactical. It listed 3 names. Call Nathan Reeves, strategic consultant. Eleanor Dane, Federal Liaison Douglas Vance. Operational contact. Her pulse stopped. Vance. Her mind raced. Could it be an old connection? A cover? Or worse, was he part of this? Before she could think further, the desk phone buzzed. She hesitated, then answered. Jennings. Sarah, it's Vance, came the agent's familiar voice. Listen carefully. We've got movement on Reeves. He's flying out from D.C. tonight. I'm sending a team to relocate you in 10 minutes. Don't open the door for anyone until then. 10 minutes? She asked. Why not now? Static filled the line. Then click. The call went dead. Sarah stared at the phone, suspicion clawing its way up her spine. Something wasn't right. Outside, through the half-closed blinds, she caught the glint of headlights, not from the direction of the FBI field office, but the opposite end of the street. The same black sedan. Her gut clenched. She moved fast, grabbed her bag, her Beretta, the files. She cut the lights, opened the back window, and slipped out into the rain-soaked alley just as the front door creaked open. Men's voices carried faintly through the storm. She's not here. Search the perimeter. Sarah ducked behind a dumpster, heart pounding. She could see them now, Black tactical uniforms. No agency markings. Not FBI, Reeves's men. They moved like wolves, silent and confident. Sarah crept along the fence, careful not to make a sound. She reached the rear gate and pushed through into the next block. Her breath came in clouds, the adrenaline sharp and pure. The city was asleep. Warehouses, old factories, neon signs buzzing faintly through the fog. She needed to get somewhere safe, somewhere off-grid. She found an old auto shop, 3 blocks down, boarded windows, abandoned years ago. The door gave way with a quiet shove. Inside, she crouched near the workbench, scanning the shadows. Then she pulled out her phone and booted up the encrypted channel Vance had given her. But this time, she didn't send a message. She traced the IP address embedded in his earlier text. The result froze her blood. The signal didn't come from FBI headquarters. It came from a private server registered under Horizon Tactical Solutions. Son of A, she didn't finish. The sound of boots outside snapped her focus back to survival. She slid deeper into the shadows, crouched low. Through the cracked glass, she saw flashlights slicing through the fog. 3 men sweeping the street, methodical. They'd followed her trail. Her mind raced. She had 1 clip left. No backup, no radio. But she had something better, her training. Sarah crawled along the dark wall until she reached the side door. She cracked it open an inch and slipped into the rain. The men were close now, 30 feet away, moving in formation. One of them spoke into a headset. Alpha 2, perimeter clear. Moving to check the alley. She recognized the accent, same contractor unit as before. Reeves's elite. They're here to erase me. She waited until one passed close enough that she could smell the gun oil on his rifle. Then she moved. A single motion. She grabbed his arm, yanked him forward, and slammed his head against the wall. He went limp. The others spun around instantly. Contact. Sarah fired 2 quick shots, hitting one in the leg, another in the shoulder. They fell, shouting in pain. Before reinforcements could arrive, she disappeared again into the fog. She ran until her lungs burned. The streets blurred past, factory yards, flickering billboards, empty parking lots. Every sound echoed too loudly. Finally, she reached the underpass by the old freight yard. There, hidden beneath a pile of rusting steel, she found what she was looking for, her emergency cash. She'd buried it years ago, back when she'd promised herself never to fight again. Inside, a compact Sig Sauer pistol, a burner phone, and a set of false credentials under the name Marla Trent. Sarah exhaled shakily. Guess I'm back, Marla. She used the burner to send one message, encrypted through a shadow network she still remembered from her service days. T.O. Unknown federal asset. Whisper. MSG. Reeves active. Vance compromised. Need extraction and verification. Location compromised. Moving to rail yard. She waited. 2 minutes later, the reply came. FAR OM. Whisper MSG. Confirmed. You're not wrong. You've been flagged rogue. Trust no one. Upload evidence ASAP. Her stomach dropped. The Bureau thought she was the traitor now. Meanwhile, across town, inside a high-rise office glowing with corporate light, Colonel Nathan Reeves watched a live feed of Sarah running through the rain. Stubborn as ever, he murmured. Beside him stood Eleanor Dane, the polished woman Sarah had seen listed as Horizon's federal liaison. She's dangerous, Dane said. She knows too much. Reeves smiled faintly. She always did. That's what made her the best. But she's not our target anymore. She's bait. Bait? For Vance, Reeves said. He thinks he can play both sides. Let him run to her. We'll take them both out and clean the record in one night. He leaned back, lighting a cigar. The ember glowed in the reflection of the city skyline. By morning, the world will think Sarah Jennings died resisting arrest. Neat, efficient. Over. Back in the freight yard, Sarah had no idea she'd just become the centerpiece of a deadly chess game. She slipped into one of the derelict train cars, barricading the doors with steel rods. The wind howled through the cracks, cold enough to sting her lungs. She spread the Horizon files across the floor. Photographs, invoices, coded memos. She used her flashlight to scan them quickly, snapping images with her burner. Most of it confirmed what she suspected. Horizon was funneling experimental tech to private buyers overseas. But one document caught her attention. Project Nightline, Strategic Autonomous Defense Systems. Oversight, C. Reeves. Status. Operational deployment, Phase 2. Phase 2. She muttered under her breath. Whatever you're planning, Reeves, I'll burn it down. Then the train car creaked. She froze. Footsteps. 2 sets. Coming closer. She crouched behind a crate, pistol drawn. The door screeched open, and there he was. Agent Vance. He looked haggard, drenched from the storm. His weapon was holstered, his eyes searching the dark. "Sarah," he said softly. "It's me. Don't shoot." Her finger hovered on the trigger. "How did you find me?" "I tracked the signal from your encrypted ping. I got your message about Reeves. I had to be sure you were alive." Her eyes narrowed. "You're on Horizon's payroll." Vance's expression hardened. "That's what he wants you to think." "Then explain the audit file. Your name's right next to his." He exhaled. "Because I was undercover, Jennings. 2 years inside Horizon, trying to expose their pipeline. Reeves caught on. The attack at the factory was his way of flushing me out." Sarah studied him, trying to read the truth in his face. The storm howled outside, drowning everything else. "Then prove it," she said. He tossed a flash drive onto the floor. "Everything. Account records, mission directives, encrypted call logs. Reeves has people inside the bureau. That's why we're ghosts now." Sarah picked it up cautiously. "If this is real, it could bury him." Vance nodded. "But only if we live long enough to deliver it." Before either could say another word, a sniper round tore through the side of the train car. They hit the floor as glass exploded above them. Reeves's voice came faintly through a loudspeaker outside. "Good evening, Sergeant Jennings," he called. "Nice to see you haven't lost your edge." Sarah's blood turned to ice. The colonel had come himself. She met Vance's eyes. "You still got your badge?" "Yeah," he said. "Then you're about to earn it." They exchanged a quick, grim nod. Soldier and agent, 2 people who'd both been betrayed by the same man. Outside, Reeves's men were fanning out through the yard, flashlights cutting through the fog. Sarah checked her weapon and took position by the window. Vance loaded his sidearm. "What's the plan?" She looked toward the approaching shadows. "Same as before," she said. "Survive. Then make him pay." The freight yard smelled of rust and rain, a metal graveyard lit by the sickly glare of overhead lamps. Wind hissed through the gaps between boxcars, carrying the distant drone of sirens and the occasional bark of a police radio. Shadows moved like animals among the stacked pallets and broken crates. Sarah pressed her back to splintered wood, breath flat, the Beretta in her hand feeling like an extension of her will. Beside her, Agent Douglas Vance peered through a cracked window, white-knuckled and businesslike. For a moment, they simply listened, to the distant crunch of gravel, to the soft patter of Reeves's men closing in. "We have to split them," Sarah whispered. "Half draw toward the east axis. The rest loop from the west. We can't let them get between us and the main road. Vance slid his hand into his jacket and produced the flash drive, wrapped in a plastic film. He met her eyes. "You sure you can trust me?" he asked, the question heavier than the rain. Sarah's jaw tightened. Trust was scarce currency. She nodded once. "Right now we trust survival." They moved as one through the dark, two silhouettes slipping between hulks of metal, edging toward a narrow catwalk that ran above the tracks. Sarah thought of the factory floor, of the men she'd watched fall, and the woman she'd watched crawl away. She thought of the sound of Ray's voice over the comms, the cold cadence of a man who'd built his whole life on obedience. Her fingers found a smoke grenade clipped to her belt. She thought of classrooms, real ones, with chalk dust and warnings, and of the one she'd been thrown back into, where lessons were learned with blood. Outside, footsteps multiplied. Reeves's men moved in a disciplined sweep, their flashlights slicing the fog into bright slashes. A spotlight picked out the hulking shape of a freight container. A figure ducked behind it and fired once. The shot rang out, high and angry. A test. Reeves's men converged, and the trap tightened. Sarah and Vance split. She took the high ground. He slipped along the ballast. Her hand found the rail of the catwalk, and she crawled forward, silent and low. From above, she had an angle, a thin window into the approaching formation. Her breath became counting. 1.2.3. She pulled the pin on the smoke grenade and lobbed it. It landed amid a group of contractors and bloomed into a white, choking cloud. Flashlights flared and then dimmed. A shout, orders in clipped tones, cut through the haze. Someone on the ground cursed. Reeves was orchestrating a net from a distance. Sarah saw men breaking left and right, losing formation. Now, she fired 3 quick, precise shots from the catwalk. A man toppled into the gravel, his rifle clattering away. Below, Vance surged forward, taking advantage of the confusion. Together they pushed, driving the attackers into improvised kill zones. Sarah had already visualized in her head. The firefight was close and ugly. Pellets of metal chewed through plywood, sparks splintered from steel, and the fog tasted like copper. Sarah moved with practiced economy, a foot to the flank, a swing of the hips, a single squeeze of the trigger when the threat presented an angle. Men she'd once considered faceless enemies were suddenly people moving like marionettes cut from their strings. Some of the contractors fell. Some fled, but others adapted. Reeves had left no room for amateurs. He'd supplied his unit with small drones that dipped in and out of the fog, scanning for heat signatures. One of them hummed over the rail cars and nicked Sarah's cheek with a hot gust. She cursed, swatted it with the butt of her Glock, and watched it plunge into a puddle, fizzing. 2 left flank. "West," Vance shouted. He'd taken down a man clutching a wound in his shoulder and was dragging him toward cover, the flash drive still secured against his chest. They moved like a 2-person cell reactivated, instinct forging strategy. Each knew their role, her eyes on the battlefield, his mind cataloging the larger game. If the FBI believed him, he was supplying them with the means to pull Reeves into a legal vice. If he was lying, Sarah had already decided she'd burn whatever charade remained. A flare arced across the yard and burst in a bloom of red. For an instant, everything was raw and naked. The wet chrome of rifles, the white of fear on faces, the brief sheen of lightning on a man's tooth. In that moment, Reeves stepped into view on the far platform, framed by a floodlight. He was older than she remembered, but the eyes were the same, predatory, amused. He was flanked by Eleanor Dane, seemingly calm, a perfect picture of corporate indifference. "Sergeant Jennings," Reeves called out, his voice oddly bright. He raised his hand as if saluting an old acquaintance. Impressive work. You always did have a flair for the dramatic. Sarah aimed and didn't fire. This wasn't about pulling a trigger on a man with a name. It was about ending a network. You picked the wrong targets, Colonel, she shouted back. This ends now. He laughed softly. Ends? No. This is process improvement. We're reallocating risk to the smallest possible denominator. He stepped forward. Drop the weapon and hand over the drive, and I'll make sure this goes away quietly. You helped stop the first wave. You've earned a clean exit. Behind him, more men shifted into position, a secondary cordon. Reeves had planned contingencies. He always had. Vance's voice was low and tight. He's lying, Sarah. Don't, a siren wailed in the distance. Police, too few, too late. Reeves used the sound to cover motion. He reached into his jacket and produced a device, like a remote. For a moment, Sarah thought he would detonate something. Instead, the remote sent a sharp burst over the contractor's earpieces, a command. On the catwalk, men hesitate. On the ground, someone bolted. Confusion spread. Drop it, Reeves said again. Sarah's throat was bone dry. She looked to Vance. He was breathing shallow, eyes fixed on Reeves. She made a decision like she'd made 1,000 before. Quick, necessary. She thumbed her radio, which they'd left active. All units, this is Jennings, she barked, the Rolodex of authority in her voice taking over. This yard is under federal containment. Any male in tactical gear surrender now. The voice came through static, but it carried weight. The echo of years leading men into danger. In the commotion, Reeves's men flinched, uncertain whom they served. That momentary fracture was all Sarah needed. She sprinted down from the catwalk, dropping into the rain-slick gravel like a wolf. 2 contractors charged at her with knives drawn. She met them squarely, elbows and knees, and a practiced brutality no boxing match could mimic. She brought one down, then the second, the world narrowing to bone and breath. Vance knocked a man off balance beside her and slammed a radio into his ear, barking orders that sounded suspiciously like authority. Reeves's smile thinned. He lifted a hand, and in that motion confirmed the thing Sarah felt in her bones. This man expected to win by rules, written at another table. He'd expected his proxies to hold, to snuff the evidence, to eliminate witnesses. He had not expected Sarah to have corners of the city that still remembered her. The final moments were messy and swift. A police cruiser crawled into the yard, officers dismounting with weapons up, reinforcements summoned by a frantic 911 call from one of the factory survivors. The sight of uniforms bolstered the side of the law. The remaining contractors, seeing the odds shift, made a last-ditch run for the tree line. Vance seized the moment, taking 2 of Reeves's men hostage by flanking them and pressing the flash drive to one man's throat. "Who funds you?" he demanded. The man's eyes were hollow, used to following. Reeves saw the tide turn, and with the professional calm of the long protected, did something only cowards do. He vanished. Under cover of smoke and sound, he retreated in a small convoy, Eleanor Dane following like a shadow. For all his planning, Reeves had no stomach for the messy end. Sarah watched him go and felt something tighter than rage, the cold calculus of a lesson unfinished. As the cars slipped into the fog, she shouted after them, "You'll get your day, Reeves." He turned his head briefly, and for the first time, there was a flicker of something like respect. "So will you?" he called. "So will you." When the dust settled, officers cuffed the dazed remaining contractors. The flash drive was in Vance's hand, blood smudged on the plastic sleeve. Police and federal agents spread through the yard, shouting into radios and taking statements. Sarah stood amid the chaos, rain running down her face, hands trembling slightly from exertion and adrenaline. Brock's face rose in her memory, the way he'd laughed earlier that week at her kindergarten warnings. How small that taunt seemed now, trivial as a child's tantrum. Vance approached, exhausted, his suit soaked through. He offered her a small, grim smile. "We have them," he said simply. For a breathless moment, Sarah let herself believe it might be over. But Reeves's retreat was not surrender. It was recalibration. In the pit of her stomach, she felt it like a stone being set. The drive had names, records, and proof, yet the man they sought had vanished into power and influence. She slid her hand into her pocket and clenched a scrap of paper, a photo of the 2 soldiers who died under Reeves's watch. The guilt she'd carried for years flickered, then steadied. The factory had been her battlefield now, but the war stretched wider. "This isn't over," she told Vance, the words an oath. He nodded. "No, but right now we've got leverage." She looked at the fading taillights, and then at the rain-soaked tracks. The lesson had been delivered to the men who mocked her, not in satire, but in survival. They'd learned who she was the hard way. The real classroom, however, was just beginning. Dawn broke over the city with a thin gray light that did little to warm the wet streets. The freight yard was quiet now, the battle long past, leaving only the smell of gunpowder, oil, and rain. Police vehicles and FBI units swarmed the perimeter, filing reports and securing the remaining evidence. Sarah Jennings stood on the edge of the yard, her coat clinging to her frame, soaked and tired, yet vigilant. Vance walked beside her, briefcase in hand, carrying the flash drive like a relic, one that could bring down a network powerful enough to manipulate the military and federal oversight. "You ready for this?" Vance asked, eyes scanning the horizon. Sarah took a deep breath. "I've been ready my whole life. This time, it's personal." Reeves had vanished the night before, but the intelligence from the flash drive revealed his location. A private facility on the outskirts of the city, an abandoned airfield converted into a fortified compound. Satellite images, internal horizon logs, and even financial transactions traced his every move. Sarah and Vance approached the site in a nondescript armored van. Both were armed and alert, knowing that Reeves had every advantage: high-tech surveillance, mercenary guards, and escape routes planned for months. Vance glanced at her. "No backup this time. If he tries anything, it's just us." Sarah nodded, loading her rifle. "Then let's finish it." The compound was deceptively quiet, surrounded by fences, motion sensors, and cameras. They slipped past the first perimeter using codes gleaned from the flash drive, and once inside, the tension was palpable. Every step echoed against steel walls, the only sound their synchronized breathing and the distant hum of generators. They moved through hallways filled with the remnants of a clandestine operation, blueprints for drone strikes, crates of advanced targeting systems, and walls plastered with surveillance photographs agents, soldiers and civilians caught in Reeves's web. Finally, they reached the central control room. Reeves was there, seated in a high-backed chair, monitors casting a cold glow across his face. Eleanor Dane stood behind him, poised and immaculate as always. "Ah, Sergeant Jennings," Reeves said, voice calm and almost amused. "I was wondering when you'd arrive." Sarah raised her rifle. "It ends today, Colonel." He leaned back, hands steepled. "Ends? Oh no, my dear. This is only a lesson. You learn fast at the factory. Let's see if you've really understood what it means to play the game." Dane moved subtly to the side door, likely signaling a backup plan. Sarah noticed instantly and shifted her stance, training her rifle on both targets. Vance whispered, "We need to isolate him. Take the shot on Dane if she moves, but Reeves has to be contained alive. We need testimony, leverage, proof." Sarah nodded. "Copy that." Reeves stood slowly, showing no fear. You think you've cornered me? You've been chasing ghosts your entire career, Jennings. And now you want to play hero again? How quaint. Not hero, Sarah corrected. Accountable. You've lied, killed, and betrayed everyone who trusted you. That ends now. Reeves smirked. Trust is a luxury you cannot afford. You learned that in combat. And yet here you are, playing by rules I wrote for you. Before Vance could react, Reeves pressed a button on his console. Alarms blared, and the doors locked automatically. Surveillance cameras spun toward them, projecting their image on every monitor in the compound. Reeves's men, dozens, hidden throughout the building, moved to encircle them. Sarah's mind raced. She analyzed the angles, the shadows, the likely movement of the guards. Every tactical instinct she had honed over years of war kicked in. Vance whispered, "We're outnumbered." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "Then we make every shot count. Remember the factory? Same rules apply." The first wave of guards broke cover. Sarah fired from a crouched position, taking precise shots at knees and shoulders, incapacitating rather than killing when possible. Vance covered her flank, moving like a specter through the dimly lit room. Reeves watched, calm as ever, calculating every move. "Good," he said. "You've improved. But let's see how you handle everything at once." He activated automated turrets hidden in the ceiling. Bullets whizzed past, embedding themselves into walls, splintering steel and concrete. Sarah and Vance dove behind a console for cover. "Override the security," Vance shouted. "I can get the locks, but I need a moment." Sarah moved low and fast, sliding to the nearest terminal. She jammed the override from the flash drive into the console, working quickly as Reeves barked orders to his remaining guards. Sparks flew from overloaded circuits, and the turrets jammed with the screech of grinding metal. The tide had shifted. Vance joined her, and together they stormed the center of the room. Reeves retreated a step, realization flickering across his face. "You think you can outmaneuver me?" he said, raising his hands slightly. "Not think," Sarah said. "No," she advanced, rifle steady. Reeves raised his hands in mock surrender, but his eyes betrayed calculation. He lunged toward a console, attempting to detonate a hidden explosive. Sarah fired twice. One round shattered his wrist, the other knocked him backward. He fell, groaning, clutching the shattered remains of his device. Dane tried to intervene, but Vance moved faster, taking her down with a precise strike. She struggled, but it was over in seconds. Sarah stood over Reeves, rifle trained on his chest. "It's over," she said, voice calm but deadly. Reeves laughed, low and bitter. "Over? No. This is survival. Always survival. You'll understand when you've made enemies of the right people." "You made enemies of everyone who trusted you," Sarah said. "You've lost, Colonel, and the world will see it." Reeves's capture was swift. Police and FBI units stormed the facility moments later, taking him into custody along with remaining Horizon tactical operatives. The flash drive Vance carried contained incontrovertible evidence, financial records, communications, and orders linking Reeves to illegal operations, murders, and corruption at the highest levels. In the debriefing room, Sarah watched Reeves being led away in handcuffs, unrepentant, still trying to project control. But his empire of shadows was unraveling. Media reports, leaked evidence, and federal investigations began exposing the network he had built. Sarah leaned back in her chair, finally allowing herself a deep breath. For the first time in years, the weight of guilt and fear felt lighter. She had faced betrayal, ambush, and near-death encounters, and survived. Vance approached, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You did it," he said simply. Sarah smiled faintly. We did it. But it's never just one person, is it? He shook his head. No, but you were the spark. The one who refused to quit. Everyone else just followed the trail you blazed. In the weeks that followed, Reeves faced trial. Every act, every order, every lie was laid bare. Horizon Tactical Solutions crumbled under scrutiny. Those who had participated in his operations were either arrested or fled the country. Sarah returned to civilian life, but she didn't go back to quiet maintenance work. Instead, she became a consultant for federal tactical operations, teaching lessons she'd learned in war, betrayal, and survival. She visited the families of fallen soldiers from Afghanistan, apologized, and helped bring closure where she could. The ghosts that had haunted her were quieter now, replaced with purpose and a sense of justice served. One evening, standing in a sunlit classroom at a federal training facility, she spoke to a group of new recruits. This isn't kindergarten, she said, her voice steady. The world is dangerous. People will betray you. Tests will push you past limits. But remember this, courage isn't just about fighting. It's about standing when everything is against you. You make your own rules when survival demands it, and sometimes that's the only way to teach the lesson those who think they can destroy you. Her eyes met theirs, each young soldier seeing the weight of experience behind her calm exterior. Outside, the city moved on, unaware of the battles fought in shadows, of the ghosts confronted, and of the woman who had survived against impossible odds. Sarah Jennings walked out into the sunlight, wet streets reflecting her determined stride. The world was still chaotic, still dangerous, but for the first time in a long time, she felt in control. And somewhere deep down, she knew, the next battle might come, but she would be ready.